Hey everyone, Stalky Boy here. Welcome to another video on Evil Dead the game. Today I'll be making a guide for the Necromancer. I've been playing this guy quite a bit and feel I have a pretty good understanding of him. I felt I'd make a guide for him to help anyone out that might be struggling since demon gameplay can be pretty overwhelming at first. Let's get started. It's important to note that the game is still relatively new. Once we find out more about the game, certain strategies may change, but I have played a lot of games with the strategies I'm about to list and I have not lost with them yet. But just like demon players, survivor players will also get better at the game. I'll quickly go over a basic demon guide just so I don't confuse new players. When starting a demon match, you want to gather energy and spend it as much as you can. Spending points on chests is the most important since they give you the most points. They are usually in buildings and will make a humming noise. Doing quick sweeps around buildings is a good idea to find these. You never want to be wandering around anywhere near the start of the game with max points, unless you are approaching a survivor. Once you start gaining levels, your priorities and what you level up will change depending on what your build revolves around. Hey everyone, Stalky Boy from the future. As of the time I was writing the script for these, I didn't realize just how powerful basic units were. Right now, they are insanely strong. You can wipe out a team very, very quickly with just possessing these basic units. They're very cheap. You get them at the start of the game. And with Doot the Flute, they can do a ridiculous amount of damage. So it kind of makes elites way less good in comparison. Also, unlike the boss, they don't have a very long cooldown in which you get them back. So right now, basic units and just overwhelming the survivors with them is the best thing you can do right now. I would still say use the boss and elites just because they can be fun. But if you want to go very, very meta, basic units are the way to go. The boss can play around basic units, so I wouldn't say he's entirely worthless. But do keep in mind, even if a coordinated group is taking out your troopers very quickly, if you can manage to get health lower, they will be using shemps and amulets. They'll just be using their resources, which is very important. Unlike Dead by Daylight, they cannot constantly heal each other for free. They need to use some sort of resource at some point. So if you can keep whittling that down, it'll make it much easier for you later in the game. Infernal Energy basically just serves as your health bar when possessing units, but it's also what you need to use when doing anything. If you are low on it, you can use a jump scare on survivors to gain more while also increasing fear levels. Once survivors start getting better stuff, you definitely want to level up traps to at least level 2, even if you are focusing on basic units, since this increases the amount of fear survivors get from traps. And the Necromancer also has a perk that increases fear with skeletons, so the traps, along with the basic units that will be surrounding them, will increase fear immensely. Possessing a strong survivor can change the tide of a game in seconds if they have a really good gun. Also important to note, certain upgrades like the boss are locked until you get to a certain level. You can't actually get the boss, which is done by leveling him up for the first time, until level 10. Getting the boss is very important if your build revolves around the boss. You can also only level up other stats so many times depending on how high your level is. Now that we have covered some of the basics of demon gameplay, let's go over what makes this class unique. The Necromancer is very good at completely overwhelming survivors with a ton of enemies and also forcing them into uncomfortable positions. He can spam more reinforcements than other classes, but there is a trade-off. His units are weaker than the other classes in terms of durability, which is where his unique ability comes into play. This little skeleton that plays the flute. We'll be calling him Doot. Doot increases every skeleton within his aura's damage and defense to a ridiculous amount. You can kill certain survivors in just 3 hits with this little guy active. This is the little guy that will force the survivors into uncomfortable positions, because they either have to deal with him or have an extremely difficult time facing off against your army of darkness. The smart thing to do with Doot is to place him next to traps. Place him on the second story of a building, and placing unit traps around the bottom and top floor will nearly ensure death for the survivor. You never really want to place this guy in the open unless you absolutely have to, or if there's a survivor by themselves. A nice easy strategy to kill a survivor by themselves is to place Doot next to a trap, which will usually lure survivors near said trap, and then when the trap goes off, you possess the unit, and then you kill them very quickly thanks to the additional buffs of the flutist. Another effective strategy is actually playing a little bit of hockey with Doot, placing Doot behind a rock or something, and then immediately placing Evil Ash in front of Doot's cover and guarding him. Doot's buffs also apply to Evil Ash, and if you happen to already have Evil Ash's damage upgraded, well, he can two-shot survivors with Doot's influence if the survivors don't go for Doot. You simply charge in with your overpowered self and fight them off. If a survivor with a good gun's fear is high, you can also use Doot as a distraction similar to when playing goalie Evil Ash, and once they are distracted by him, possess said survivor, catching them off guard and dealing lots of damage. While we're on the topic of Evil Ash, let's go over him. Evil Ash is the boss of the Necromancy class, and he is very strong when used correctly. When powered up by Doot, like mentioned, he gets increased defense and attack. If you want to use this boss, you need to level him up. If you do not level him up, he is laughably weak. Now, for his abilities. For his first, he can summon a bunch of basic unit skeletons, which is another good reason to level up the basics if you're focusing on the boss. For his second, he revives basic unit skeletons, and if you have a certain upgrade, they come back stronger. For this reason, I like to wait a little bit before using the boss. As soon as I spawn Evil Ash in, I immediately call in some skeletons and revive all of my fallen comrades. This will cause a ton of havoc for the survivors to deal with while you are on the battlefield. For his final ability, he has a grab that heals himself and deals damage to the survivor. When doing this, Evil Ash is completely vulnerable, but the attack cannot be dodged. Evil Ash can also use heavy and light attacks. And like I mentioned earlier, when spawning Evil Ash, it's a wise idea to save Doot for him and then play goalie as Evil Ash, with all of your units being stronger thanks to Doot. Now, let's talk about his units a little more. Why would you pick one over the other? I personally prefer the basic units since they are faster, and so many of Evil Ash's abilities use basic units, and I like to use Evil Ash. They also sound pretty funny. The elite units, on the other hand, do an insane amount of damage, but are slower. It is very possible to completely wipe out an entire team with these guys if the survivors aren't careful.
Maybe not. Oh my god, what are you doing?
They are also tankier than the basic units, but I find their attack animation is slow enough for a decent survivor to dodge with ease. And since the elites have a long recovery animation, they'll gain the stamina back. Since basic units are so cheap and one portal can spawn multiple of them, it makes it a lot harder to dodge a ton of the basic units. Both have great potential though. Use whatever fits you more. Use these strategies if you happen to find survivors in the early phase and in the Kandarian Dagger and Page phase. During the Dagger and Page phase, another thing you can do is continually possess basic units and weaken the team for a little bit. Once they are weakened to a good degree, feel free to summon the boss to finish them off. At the Kandarian Dagger and the Lost Page phase, if you happen to lose the point, quickly mark it on the map and immediately head over after being banished. You want to essentially just bully them as much as you can until they get over to the Lost Page, being as high a level as possible if the distance between the two objectives is a lot. Feel free to use the boss. You can wreak some serious damage, forcing them to use resources and have your boss back by the time they get to the second objective. If they get into a car, be sure to possess it and drive as far away as possible, forcing them to take longer to get to the objective. You can also attempt to place a unit in front of the car and possess it, potentially crashing the car, and if you do so, you can wreak havoc on them with the unit you've already possessed, or once again, they'll just be forced to walk over and you can bully them more, increasing your levels and decreasing their resources. If you lose both the Dagger and the Page, and the survivors are beginning to head over to the final boss, the Dark Ones, there are some cheeky strategies you can do. Like before, you want to mark the location and bully them, but unlike before, a fog will inch closer and closer to the dark ones. If the fog gets close enough and a survivor's fear is high, you can possess them and force them to run into the fog, effectively killing them for the match. I had a match against a very effective group, but I managed to use this strategy against their support character Cheryl. They quickly crumbled without her. Once at the Dark Ones, you want to use a lot of the same strategies we've mentioned. But there is an additional little strategy you can do. When possessing a survivor, run into the Dark Ones and shoot the other survivors from there. Once the possession is over, the survivor will take damage and you will have damaged the team as well. For the most part, you want to play this the same as the dagger and page. Put Dude in an uncomfortable spot, possess units, play hockey with the boss character. It's very hard to deal with all of this while also being distracted by the actual boss, the Dark Ones. I've had teams completely ignore me in favor of the Dark Ones, and it caused them to suffer a defeat. Now, if it gets to the complete final phase with the Necronomicon, there are two ways to go about this. Either focus the book or focus the team. If the team is weak, I would put more focus on them. If not, try your best to distract them with Dude and focus the book. I haven't gotten to this phase very often as a demon, so I don't actually have a lot to say about it. In terms of builds of the Necromancer, I think there are two ways to go about building him. You can either focus on the boss or elites. This leads into the next few branches you could go with them. If you are having a huge focus on the boss, I would definitely upgrade the basic units since they go hand in hand with lots of his abilities, such as raising units from the dead and summoning more units. Both of these work very well with the basic units. If you really like elites, I would simply just focus on the elite and basic units since the elites don't mesh very well with the boss. A whole bunch of basics as a distraction as the elites go in for the kill is very difficult for the survivor to deal with. It sort of plasters up the elite's weakness of being slow. It's hard to dodge when you have 3 of these little munchkins biting down your ankle. Basic units are also really good at building up fear because of this Necromancer perk. So no matter what you do, I think having a plethora of these little guys is good since it will increase fear a lot faster. With all that being said, that is my guide on the Necromancer. If I missed something, please let me know in the comments. There's still lots to this game, I'm sure, that hasn't been discovered. Since it's still very new, if this helps out in any way, please consider leaving a like, subscribe to see more videos like this, and comment what you would like to see next. Thank you all very much for watching. Take care, everyone.